Travelling from Chester into North Wales in search of his Welsh ancestry is the hard man of Coronation Street, actor Ian Puleston Davies. As his Corrie character, Owen Armstrong, he certainly plays the tough guy.
If you were proud, you would crawl on your knees and you would lick that man's boots before you let that happen.
But in real life, is Ian just as tough?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about whether I'll be a bit weepy. I hate it. I hope I'm not, because not just for my daughter's sake, but I hope I'm going to man up the next couple of days.
Growing up in Wales, what does Ian know of his Puleston ancestry?
I know a little bit about it, but I want the truth now, the whole truth.
So ready to learn the whole truth of his family ancestry, Ian Puleston Davies is coming home. On this journey, Ian will learn of his family's connection to a lost community.
Well, it's tragic. That sounds... So they drowned a village.
How the American Civil War brought tragedy to his family in Wales.
I promised my daughter that I wouldn't get glassy-eyed, but immediately, you know, you see her age, 16 months lesser.
And can he really trace his Puleston ancestry to the 14th century Welsh prince, Owain Glyndŵr?
Let's find out who the Pulestons really are.
Ian grew up in Flintshire with big sister Delyth, but this journey begins in the village of Llanfair Dyffryn Clwyd, here in Denbighshire, near Ruthin, where this grand country house, Plas Newydd Hall, stands. He will soon learn that he is by no means the first generation in his Puleston family to walk up this drive, at the centre of an ancient farm estate. Waiting inside to reveal the full Puleston family tree is genealogist Mike Churchill-Jones. And just entering the house, it's clear the Pulestons were a family of some importance.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, Mike.
Welcome to Plas Newydd Hall.
Lovely to be here.
Llanfair Dyffryn Clwyd.
Easy for you to say.
Yes, I'll explain why we're here as we go on.
Okay.
But we've been researching your family tree.
Yeah.
And this is what we've come up with.
They may not go back quite as far as the 14th century and Owain Glyndŵr, but straight away Ian can see that he has extensive Welsh roots across North Wales in Denbighshire, Carnarvonshire and Flintshire.
No, I think it's just wonderful. Every Welshman and Welshwoman should have this done. I really truly believe that.
Ian, you've got all these deep Welsh roots in Wales.
Yeah.
99% of them are farmers.
Right.
What's your thoughts on that?
I should have been a farmer. There was a time when I was going to be a farmer, and then you know, there was a drama teacher at my local school, and that was it.
Changed your mind?
He changed my mind.
Okay.
Two of his great-great-grandparents, Mary Ann Puleston and Edward Puleston, were born here on the Plas Newydd estate.
I've never been here. I didn't know it existed. And I can't believe it's just over the hill from Mulvanna, where I used to spend many a happy hour up on that mountain.
Very important place for your Puleston
Wow, and all the
family.
time it was down below.
Mm. But this is a man you're going to be hearing an awful lot more about on your journey.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
He's one of the key ingredients on your journey.
All right then, Mike.
Not quite all of Ian's ancestors were farmers. His great-grandparents were Robert and Fanny Lloyd-Jones. Robert was from Bala and was an architect of some repute in the town.
Your great-grandfather, Robert Lloyd-Jones.
Right.
And his father, Evan.
Yeah.
They were heavily involved in the Bala area in the building of chapels.
Goodness me, that's lovely.
How many chapels have you been in?
Not enough, by the sound of it. Yeah. I've got a lot of chapel catching up to do, haven't I?
I think so, yeah.
In a village near Bala in North Wales, Robert Lloyd-Jones designed this chapel, a building with a secret to share, which Ian will learn later on his journey. But first, Ian is off to learn more of his farming ancestors, who farmed here on the Plas Newydd estate. Starting with his 3 times great-grandparents, John and Mary Puleston, tenant farmers who worked the very land on which Ian is now walking. And in one of the original cattle barns, Ian meets with eminent Welsh historian, Dr. Eirwyn William, who begins his story in 1841.
In 1841, your ancestor John and his family were farming here. He, his wife Mary, and 3 children and their household. But he had succeeded his father and his father's father as tenant farmers in this area. So you've got a long tradition of prosperous, well-respected tenant farmers in your background.
Right.
There was a lot of competition, particularly in the Vale of Clwyd, because this was agriculturally amongst the richest land in Wales. Not a lot of good quality land in Wales, but this was a prime location.
Wow.
So a tenancy of a big farm here, and this farm was about 200 acres, was something that was prized. So, you know, he would have worked his way up to getting this tenancy, and equally his landlord would have wanted a good tenant of his quality. So that speaks a lot for the man. And the farm buildings where we are now, everything around you would have been known to John at the time. He used all these farm buildings.
Ian himself grew up on a farm and can now see just how much this way of life is in the blood.
Isn't that wonderful that, I mean, my father's a dairy farmer, and here we are now, talking all those years ago, and very similar stone buildings, and you know, my dad was a dairy farmer like him. That means a lot to me. It's a shame I gave it up, really. Or is it? I don't know. That's debatable.
Under the roof of this barn, his Puleston ancestors, men and women, have prospered with the tenancy of this enviable farm. But now the story moves forward to Ian's great-great-grandfather, Edward Puleston. Not having inherited the tenancy, this led him to make a crucial decision.
The youngest of the 3 children was Edward Puleston.
Yeah.
He married soon afterwards in 1858.
Right.
And then he and his wife took a crucial decision. And in my hand, I have a piece of paper,
Okay.
which is an extract from the 1860 US Census. And there at the bottom it says, Edward Puleston, born in Wales, in Wisconsin.
Gosh. Wow.
So Ian's great-great-grandparents, Edward and Jane Puleston, had left for a new life in Wisconsin in America.
So Puleston, Edward, went to the States.
With his wife.
With his wife.
Yeah.
And they went to Wisconsin. Wow, that's fascinating.
So why had Edward and Jane chosen to go so far from the life that they knew here in Wales? What had drawn them to make such an arduous journey to America?
I'm really baffled. I mean, here we are in you know, as was told to me, in very rich pastures, and yet he sought pastures new, and I'm desperate to find out. I think it's great that he had this, you know, that we have a Puleston who has such sort of a pioneering spirit. I think it's terribly exciting to think that, you know, that he had the courage and the demeanour to want to sort of up sticks. Just obviously need to know why. Appropriately, the $64,000 question: why on earth he would leave this beautiful part of the world?
What appears to have drawn Edward and Jane to Wisconsin in 1859 was the promise of a farm of their own, of free land given by the US government to European settlers. With the railroad still in its infancy, much of their 800-mile inland journey would have been by wagon. And with their new life also came the birth of a daughter, Sarah Frances. But their American dream would not last. Just 2 years after their arrival, the US would be plunged into one of the darkest episodes in its history. The Civil War between North and South. A war that raged for more than 4 years, costing over 600,000 lives and impacting on the lives of all, including Edward and Jane, who by 1863 had returned to the safety of North Wales, surviving this arduous journey home with 16-month-old Sarah. But this was not the end of Edward and Jane's ordeal, as historian Dr. Hugh Griffiths has discovered.
They had a daughter that was born out in the United States, and they brought her back with them in 1863. Unfortunately, the records show that she didn't survive that long in Wales then. And this is the records of Sarah Francis Puleston, 16 months then, was buried in this area then.
I promised my daughter that I wouldn't get glassy-eyed, but immediately, you know, you see her age, 16 months, bless her.
So she would have travelled home, and she would have arrived back home in Liverpool, would have arrived back in this very house probably. Unfortunately, she didn't make it any past 16 months now.
Oh, bless her, little thing. Okay.
So Edward and Jane's hopes of a permanent emigration to America were at an end. Or were they? Ian has travelled to Liverpool docks, where it appears in 1869, Edward and Jane stood on the quayside, waiting once again to leave these shores for America. Ian is visiting the Merseyside Maritime Museum to meet up with genealogist Mike Churchill-Jones, who believes this time Edward and Jane were determined not to return. He's found a notice advertising the sale of all their possessions in this country.
Store pigs, farm implements, the whole of the household furniture and dairy utensils, hay and corn, swedes and potatoes. 3 months credit for £5 and upwards or discount for cash. Lunch at 10 and sale at 11, punctually. What, you're selling up and going back?
That's the way it appears, yeah. So he's going to try again.
This time they had a very special destination in mind.
To a place that was thriving at the time for the Welsh. It was called Arvonia. It is in Kansas.
Oh, wow.
It was named after Carnarvon because some of the first people there were from Carnarvon.
Oh, my goodness.
This grainy photograph was one of the earliest taken of a newly established Welsh settlement named Arvonia, founded in northeast Kansas. By this time, the Pulestons had a new daughter, Fanny, together with the support of other Welsh families. But farming this land would not be easy due to the harsh climate. Later, they were joined by Edward's nephew, Robert Lloyd Jones, who would marry into their immediate family.
And in 1889, Robert Lloyd Jones marries Fanny.
Robert and Fanny married here in Arvonia in 1889. This, Arvonia's schoolhouse, would have been a very familiar sight to them. But this photograph was not taken over 100 years ago. It was in fact taken just this year. Because amazingly, the settlement of Arvonia still stands today. And the person who took these photographs especially for Ian was Susan Evans Atchinson, an Arvonia resident and historian who Ian can now speak to.
Here we go. Right. Ah, yeah, Susan.
Yes, hello.
Oh, hello. This is Ian. Ian.
Well, it's nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. Well, thank you so much for talking to me.
Well, this is so exciting.
Isn't it?
Well, I bet never in your wildest dreams did you think that you had ancestors in Kansas.
Nope. And I am more than excited, I can't tell you.
Well, great.
I only learned very recently of Edward Puleston and his strong connection with your town.
Right. And the property that they had and where they lived was about 3 miles west of the schoolhouse.
Okay.
And actually, my great-great-grandparents were neighbors to Edward Puleston, and my great-great-aunts, 2 of them, were in a wedding. They stood up with one of his daughters.
Stood up as in, I don't know that expression.
Like bridesmaids.
Oh, my...
Like they were bridesmaids or...
One of your ancestors was a bridesmaid to one of my ancestors.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
But just why has Arvonia remained unchanged to the present day? The old buildings still standing, the houses all but abandoned.
Well, when they planned the town, the railroad was supposed to go through there. And so they built it on the river, and the railroad
So do we blame the railroad?
Yes.
Okay. The demise of Arvonia is for that very reason.
It's more than 100 years since Edward and Jane Puleston lived here in this Welsh settlement. But there is still some evidence of their life here, at this old creek.
It's called Puleston Creek.
Yes.
Why?
I know that part of it runs through the property that they owned.
The Welsh language that was once spoken here in Arvonia has now disappeared. Well, not entirely.
Is it evening there or morning?
It is morning.
All right, so I don't know the Welsh for
10 o'clock in
morning.
the morning.
I only know Nostar, which is good night, so I'll have to pretend it's evening.
Nos Waith would be evening there.
There you go, that's my first Welsh lesson from an American. There you go. Right, Susan, all the very, very best. Best wishes to you.
Best wishes to you,
Right.
too.
Bye-bye now. Bye.
Bye.
Puleston Creek. What's that all about? I've got to go and paddle in Puleston Creek now.
Now the story moves back to North Wales. Ian's great-grandparents, Robert Lloyd-Jones and Fanny Puleston, returned from Arvonia to Robert's family home here in Bala, where as an architect, Robert in 1892 designed this chapel. A building Ian is keen to visit with help from Cadw historian Adele Thackeray.
All right, well, I admit I'm not an expert at chapel spotting, but you've brought me here. Is this the right postcode and address?
It's definitely the right address.
Right, well, I don't see any chapels, unless this is a trick you're playing on me, but, OK, where's the chapel?
There's a very tragic story here. The chapel's located about 200 yards in that direction,
OK.
Underneath this reservoir.
Really?
Yes, really. In the 1950s, Liverpool Corporation put in to enact a bill into Parliament to create this whole reservoir to supply water for the people of Liverpool. And there's actually a whole village underneath this reservoir now.
This was the Valley of Tryweryn in 1955. At its centre, the village of Capel Celyn. Through an Act of Parliament, the valley was to be flooded for a reservoir to serve the city of Liverpool.
Well, it's tragic. That sounds... There obviously was protest. There
was.
How far? Obviously not far enough, but what happened?
The water was destined for the city of Liverpool. Opposition to the reservoir became a defining national event in Wales. But despite the protests, the reservoir went ahead, and Robert Lloyd-Jones's chapel was demolished. Many of the valley's original residents have now passed on, but not all. What of the children? At a nearby local pub, Ian meets with Eiron Prysor Jones, who was just 13 at the time, and with Elwyn Edwards, who lived next door to the chapel.
Well, I was a school child at the time, when the valley was flooded, and I used to live next door to the chapel, in a little small holding.
Right. OK.
So what does Elwyn remember of the chapel, designed by Ian's great-grandfather?
My mother used to play the organ in the chapel, and we used to heat the chapel up and everything, really, for services. But it's a very unique chapel, really, in the fact that it was designed in a peculiar way. Doors came in from the back, obviously, but the vestry was also part of the chapel, which you could... we had Sunday school in the vestry, but if it was full, you could always drop the windows down, and it became part of the chapel to enlarge the chapel.
Goodness me.
So it was a very unique chapel, really.
Eiron was just 13 when these events took place. But it didn't stop him from wanting to protest.
Were you there at the opening of the dam,
Yes.
out of curiosity, or still under protest? Were you there with your banners waving?
I was there.
Gosh.
And the police were there in strength as well.
Yeah.
Yes, well, not only a village was drowned, but a way of life was drowned.
Yeah.
Everything that happened in Capel Celyn was in the Welsh language. There were choirs there, harp singing, poets.
Did it traumatise you? Were you, at your age, were you with the whole village? Was the whole village traumatised? How did it...
Well, it certainly traumatised the older generation.
Yeah.
It's like everything else, really. the younger you are, the sooner you adapt to different situations. But somebody who'd been all their lives in the valley, probably getting on in their 80s, it's no doubt that it traumatised them, because it certainly changed their whole way of life. You're just looking at one thing today and tomorrow it was gone, isn't it?
From a story of sadness to one of inspiration now for Ian, concerning another Puleston ancestor. This is John Puleston Jones, Ian's great-great-uncle, who also lived here in the town of Bala from the 1860s. Ian grew up in Flintshire with his sister Davies, who's also joining him to learn of this story. They're at Capel Tegid in Bala to meet with local historian Bithig Medi.
I'm here to talk about John Puleston Jones, your great-great-uncle of the famous Puleston family. And he was brought up in Bala, but when he was 18 months old, he tripped. And he damaged his eyes and was left completely blind for the rest of his life. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. His mother, Mary Ann Puleston, was very wise. She was determined that he would have to do everything for himself, not depend on anyone, as far as possible. He went to the Bala schools, the British school and Bala Boys Grammar School. He learned Braille, and later on in life, he devised the format of Welsh Braille, when most people in Wales were monoglot Welsh. That was a big breakthrough.
When you say devise, I mean, he
invented.
He invented.
Yes.
Welsh Braille. Before him, there hadn't been any form of Welsh. Wow.
No, none at all. And it's still used today.
What an amazing legacy.
Yes, of course it is. He made a big change in Wales.
Yeah, that sends a little bit of a shiver down my spine, that has, Beryl, so...
Absolutely, yes. Good for him, that's extraordinary.
I feel I can speak for both of us. We are suddenly very proud ancestors. There we go.
Oh, well, of course. Wonderful.
That's great, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
John Puleston Jones was an Oxford scholar whose extraordinarily sharp mind meant he was able to devise a new language for Braille, incorporating the Welsh alphabet. A system of Braille that is still used today, as local student Rob Williams can demonstrate.
I wrote this morning on a device called a Perkins Brailler, which creates Braille. Now, you can also see here how much room sort of Braille takes up.
Right.
So it says, Heb eich perthynas John Puleston Jones, fyswn ni ddim yn darllen y Braille yma. I'm sure you can recognise one word in there.
Yes, yes, John Puleston Jones.
Yes.
And the rest, please?
It says, without your ancestor, John Puleston Jones, I would not be reading this Braille.
Fantastic. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's a wonderful, wonderful story to hear, isn't it? A wonderful legacy.
Oh, it absolutely is. You know, it's, as you say, it's changed, his accident changed his life, but it, you know, changed many people's lives for hundreds of years to come. So it's remarkable, it really is.
He'd be so incredibly proud, wouldn't he, now? That's fantastic.
Great.
Really.
Clearly, Davies and Ian have loved learning of this story.
That's really the first time that it hit home of what an amazing
It's not just
thing
in the
he
past,
did.
is it?
No.
It's now. It's making a difference to people's lives now.
There's always that little distance or gap or whatever between then and now, but what Rob did was brought it right up to date with a bang, and reading that bit of Braille, for me, that did it for me. Hey, Davies?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really, really proud.
There's one last story that Ian would love to know more about, and this one will take him back into the mists of time. He was always told by his father that the Puleston family can trace their ancestry back to the 14th century and to Owain Glyndŵr, Prince of Wales. But this surely was no more than a fairy tale. Nevertheless, he's back at Plas Newydd Hall to meet with Welsh author and historian Gerald Morgan, who's had a lot of late nights searching for a link for Ian.
Do you know how far back your family goes?
I have an inkling that they go quite far back.
The Pulestons, of course, are an interesting bunch.
Well, why do you think so?
Because originally they're English and they're serving the king.
Yeah.
But they settle in Wales, and by 1400 they had established themselves as the kind of Anglo-Welsh gentry who were really running North Wales as squires. You've been introduced to part of your family tree, I think, back to the 18th century. So let's have a look at this sheet of paper, shall we?
At the start of his journey, Ian learnt of his Puleston ancestry stretching back to his 5 times great-grandfather, John Puleston, born in 1719. But Gerald can take this research back a lot further.
We can follow the Pulestons, thanks to that unique name, all the way back to...
This is killing me, Gerald.
Gerald has linked Ian's Puleston line into a very well-documented family tree, which reaches all the way back to the 14th century, to a Richard Puleston. But what connection does he have to Owain Glyndŵr?
If you look here, you'll find the name of Owain Glyndŵr, the Welsh national hero, leader of the Great Revolt of 1400. And if we pass along here, you'll find his sister, Lowri. And who does Lowri marry but Robert, son of Richard Puleston?
So it's a strong line?
It's a very strong line.
Wow.
It's yours.
That's great. I'm shaking. Right, okay, so it's all kosher. It's for real.
That was the word I used.
Right, well, it's hardly Welsh. Hardly a Welsh word. I'm trying to think of a fitting Welsh word other than what's the Welsh word for flabbergasted and hugely relieved. A great weight off my shoulders, myself and many other Pulestons. So it's someone was telling the truth.
Oh yes.
And we are descendants of Owain Glyndŵr and the like.
Oh yes.
Well, I'm feeling a bit giddy.
Yes.
And I can't wait to tell my 7-year-old Maggie, my 3-year-old son Charlie, that Daddy was telling the truth after all. And in fact, my father, who has always been known as a bit of a fibber, so we didn't know whether this was a huge Puleston fib or otherwise. But it looks pretty concrete to me. I am.
It's a very good line. Oh.
Wow. Can I have this to frame and put it in my bathroom?
It's yours.
Thank you very much. Gerald, you are a giver of great news today. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Ian.
I've won the Puleston lottery.
So Ian's journey ends where it began, and few could be prouder of their Welsh heritage.
I have been knocked for 6 by, you know, the lives of the Pulestons that we've talked about and I've discovered. I've come away not just being proud of being a Puleston or being reminded of the value of being a Puleston, but moreover, it sounds very cheesy, but being a Welshman. I'm just thrilled that I can walk away with that feeling.
The series continues on Friday night at 7:30 when Alex Jones goes in search of her ancestry here on BBC One Wales.